So, do you know the story of Richard Russell? It's a story that brings both joy and sadness, and is one that a lot of us can relate to. By the way, I post both solved and unsolved cases here on a weekly basis, so if true crime is your kind of thing, then please consider subscribing to Coffee House Crime. So pull up a seat, grab a coffee and sit back. This is the case of Sky King. In today's case, we're heading back to America, to the city where I was born, Seattle. Officially nicknamed the Emerald City, Seattle is well known to the world for a variety of reasons. Initially establishing itself as a town predominantly focused to satisfy the timber industry, Seattle has transformed throughout the centuries to become a vibrant city, and is now home to over 750,000 residents, with an economy heavily geared towards the engineering and tech industries. The city holds a distinctive skyline with thanks to Seattle's Space Needle, a 605-foot spire built in 1962, which is enshrined with 360-degree panoramic views of forests and mountains, including the Cascades and the Olympics. And of course, you can never forget that Seattle was the birthplace to Starbucks, opening its first coffee shop in 1971. However, before we speak any more of this city, we have to go from one corner of the United States to the exact opposite, to the Keys, located in West Florida. It was on the 19th of September 1989 that a Mr. and Mrs. Russell would give birth to their son, Richard Russell. And weighing in at just over 9 pounds, Richard started his life large, something that would carry on into his young adulthood. He was the brother to 2 younger sisters, and along with his mother and father, the family of 5 would go on to enjoy the tropical climate of Florida, including its beautiful sunsets, palm trees, and if you're old enough, cocktails. But at the age of 7, Russell and his family would give up their sunny weather and move to Wasilla, located just outside of Anchorage, Alaska. Life here was understandably very different when compared to Florida, but the Russells made it work, and Richard himself would go on to attend Wasilla High School and become a well-known athletic student in the surrounding area. He was competitive in wrestling, and when it came to football, he was a fullback for the school, scoring 6 touchdowns in his senior year alone. Approaching the end of his teenage years, Richard, who by now had acquired the nickname of Bebo, was described as a young man who brought humour and unpredictability to people's lives. He was funny, extroverted, and even described as a handful by parents. At the age of 18, upon finishing high school, Russell, or Bebo, was scouted by North Dakota's Valley City State University to play football, and eventually he was recruited, moving himself from snowy Alaska to Fargo in North Dakota. Throughout his first year of playing for Valley City, Bebo was kept on the benches for most games. He wasn't a bad player, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't remarkable. And with that said, he had a hard time being given the opportunity to properly represent his skills on the field. Richard was disappointed in himself. He saw no road ahead with Valley City, and so with that in mind, he quit after the first year. But never mind, life is bright after all, and there were plenty of other things for him to do. So on that note, he decided to re-educate himself by enrolling into Southwestern Oregon Community College, located over on the West Coast. Bebo was a religious man. Being a devout Christian, he attended weekly meetings at the Campus Crusade for Christ, where he would meet other like-minded students and help with good deeds around the community. It was in the year of 2011, during these events, that he first met a young woman named Hannah, and instantly he felt attracted to her. Feelings weren't quite the same for Hannah, but eventually she gave him a chance on a date. The two hit it off, and then fell in love. And just 1 year later, the two officially married, becoming Mr. and Mrs. Russell. The two then went on to open up a bakery together, naming it Hannah Marie's Artisan Breads and Pastries. Hannah, who was the master chef, had long ambitions to open up her own bakery, and Bebo was a laid-back and outgoing apprentice. Bebo and Hannah had great fun working together. Sure, there were hard moments, but they recognized that the squabbles were only natural. Instead, they learned to appreciate their difference in personalities in a work environment. But by the start of 2015, they had both eventually grown tired of their isolation from family, While Hannah's bakery was set up in North Bend of Oregon, their closest family was over 6 hours away in Seattle. Hannah found this hard. She wanted to be closer to family, and Oregon didn't really feel like home anyway. So by the time autumn rolled around, a decision was made. They sold their business and moved to Sumner, just south of Seattle. Their move to Seattle, which was Bebo's 6th place to call home, was an opportunity for him to explore and become himself. For the last 3 years, he had happily supported his wife build her own business, but he also had plans of his own. To use a soon-fitting term, Bebo's future was still very much up in the air. He had big dreams of one day becoming a pilot or a military officer, but in reality, he was nowhere near making those sorts of achievements possible. He lacked both the experience and educational training. But Bebo wasn't against time, he just needed plenty of it. And maybe third time in education would be the charm. And so, in 2015, Bebo enrolled into Washington State University to get a degree in social science, meanwhile picking up a job with Horizon Air. Russell would settle into his new job with Horizon Air as a ground service agent, which was based on over at Seattle-Tacoma Airport, also known as SeaTac. As a ground service agent, he was a crucial member to a tow team, a coordinated group responsible for repositioning aircraft on SeaTac's apron in order to unload and offload baggage. In December 2017, a couple years since he had started working for Horizon Air, Bebo created and uploaded a video about his job on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Bebo Russell, and I'm a ground service agent. That means I lift a lot of bags. Like a lot of bags. So many bags. Look at all them bags. Ooh, a purple one. I usually have to work outside in this. But it allows me to do some pretty cool things too.
Working for Horizon Air did come with its perks. He was often given the flexibility and opportunity to see various parts of America and the world. But it had its fair share of drawbacks too. While Bebo tolerated the work, he often complained about his conditions to family and friends. With thanks to Seattle's weather, he would often find himself in the rain. And his duties were repetitive, heavy, and exhausting, even for a man his size. But his biggest gripe was over his salary. SeaTac, which was under city jurisdiction, took pride being the first airport in America to raise its minimum wage past $15 an hour. However, the law had some awkward loopholes. Technically, only staff working inside the terminals were fully eligible for the new minimum wage, meaning that all staff working on the ramps and runways were not. This strange technicality of the law therefore meant that Bebo, day in and day out, was breaking his back in the rain for $12 an hour. And nevertheless, he put up with it and really made it a problem.
Most importantly, I get to visit those I love most.
One enemy remaining.
Enemy take it out.
It evens out in the end.
Colleagues described Bebo as a quiet guy, someone who was well liked by the other workers. He was kind-hearted, often made people laugh, and was one to find beauty in everything. And although Bebo was known to goof around at work and at times be unpredictable, no one, and I mean no one, could have expected his actions on August the 10th, 2018. Welcome to SeaTac. Seattle-Tacoma Airport, which is Seattle's largest commercial airport, has been open to the public since 1944, and it now serves over 50 million passengers and moves 500,000 metric tons of cargo every year. The date is the 10th of August 2018. The time is just shy of 7 p.m. Being in the height of summer, it was still bright outside, and the weather was as warm and clear as ever. Bebo was also working that evening. He began his shift shortly before 2:30 p.m. and had just come back from his break before returning to the airport's tarmac to report for more work. But colleagues of Bebo, who were expecting to see him sooner rather than later, couldn't find him. That's because instead, discreetly, he hopped into the front of a tow rig and drove 1 mile toward the north end of SeaTac's airfield, eventually finding his way to Cargo 1. Technically, Bebo had already breached his code of conduct. He shouldn't be here. And that reason was fully realized when entering the area, because right in the middle of Cargo 1, there she was, waiting for him.
We fight once again.
No, it was not another woman. It was a Bombardier Q400, registration N449QX. The aircraft had just completed her final flight of the day from Vancouver Island and was awaiting maintenance before shutting down for the night. The opportunity before him was apparently too much to dismiss. And probably much to his own surprise, Bebo, who had access to both the cargo area and the tow truck, began his jaw-dropping adventure. He boarded the Q400, fired up its engines, kicked off the wheel blocks, and hopped back into his tow truck. And once he had turned the aircraft 180 degrees around towards the runway, yes, he reboarded that aircraft. Air traffic control, who only noticed Bebo's aircraft as it reached runway 16, began to panic, repeatedly asking who was flying and what takeoff clearance they had. But their cries fell on deaf ears. Bebo didn't respond, and locked behind his own silence was his very own luck, because the runway was particularly quiet this evening, and the wind was blowing south. Perfect conditions for takeoff. At 7:33 p.m, Richard Bebo Russell officially took to the skies from SeaTac Airport, metaphorically taking his crown